Okay guys, I need to tell someone about the freaky thing that happened to me last night during the big storm. I'm still really shaken up about it. So I was home alone yesterday evening, just watching some Netflix to pass the time. The weather was getting pretty bad outside, storming like crazy with pouring rain and strong winds. I had just heated up some leftovers for dinner when, all of a sudden, the power flickered and shut off completely. I sighed, annoyed that I'd have to eat my food cold now with no microwave. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight to see my way to the kitchen drawer and grab some candles and matches. After lighting a few candles in the living room, I sat back on the couch to eat. The storm was still raging outside. I could hear the wind howling and tree branches scratching against the house. It was pretty spooky being alone in the dark like that. As I was eating, there was a bright flash of lightning that lit up the whole room for a split second. When the darkness returned, I thought I saw a weird shape outside the window out of the corner of my eye. I turned to look, but it was pitch black outside. I tried to shrug it off and focus on my food, but I kept glancing back at the window nervously. The wind was blowing so hard that the tree branches cast creepy shadows across the glass pane. Another lighting flash, and this time I very clearly saw the silhouette of a person standing there, staring right at me. I froze, my heart skipping a beat. Who the hell was out there in this weather just standing there looking in my window? I couldn't make out any features in the split second of light, only an average-sized human-shaped shadow. I sat there paralyzed for a moment, my mind racing. Was some creepy prowler lurking outside my house? Working up the courage, I grabbed a candle and crept closer to the window. I shielded the flame with my hand to try and eliminate any glare. As lightning flashed again, I got a better look at the figure's outline. It seemed smaller and frailer than I expected. Squinting into the darkness, I could just barely make out the shape of an old woman, soaked from the rain. She didn't move at all, just continued to stare directly at me. Lightning flashed once more, and I saw her face clearly this time. She looked ancient, with pale sunken cheeks and wild gray hair matted to her head. Her eyes seemed to pierce right through me. I stumbled backward, my mind unable to comprehend how or why this ghostly woman had ended up outside my window in the middle of this storm. Had she been standing there long? Was she specifically there to watch me for some disturbing reason? My instinct was to run and hide, but I couldn't tear myself away. I stood there, candle shaking in my hand, watching her blurry shape through the streaks of rain running down the glass. She never broke eye contact. Lightning continued to illuminate her gnarled and creepy face at sporadic intervals, but she never lost her stoic expression. Her lips didn't move, but I almost felt like she was trying to communicate something to me through her intense gaze alone. This went on for what felt like forever, but was probably only a few minutes. I couldn't bring myself to move or look away, as if I was hypnotized by this phantomly woman. Finally, a huge clap of thunder jolted me out of my paralyzed state. My fight-or-flight instincts kicked in, and I scrambled away from the window into the next room, where I huddled in a corner with my eyes clenched shut. The next lightning flash lit up the room enough for me to carefully peek back out at the window. The woman was gone, just endless rain pounding against the glass. No sign she had ever been there at all. I stayed awake all night, keeping every light in the house on once the power came back. I didn't see any more glimpses of her, but I couldn't shake the chilling image seared into my mind. Those cold eyes bored into mine. It was horrifying. I even went outside the next morning to check around the window for footprints or some evidence, but the ground was washed clean from the storm. So that's my scary story, guys. I have no explanation for what I saw last night. A ghost, maybe? All I know is it was the freakiest experience of my life. I'll never forget that face of hers as long as I live. Let me know if you have any theories about the creepy window woman. I just hope she never pays me a visit again. I don't really know where to start with this. I guess I should introduce myself first. My name's John, and I'm just a normal guy working a normal office job. Nothing too exciting. But last week, something really freaked me out, and I just have to get it off my chest, even if it makes me sound crazy. It started on a regular weekday morning. My alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. like always. I slapped it off, dragged myself out of bed, and shuffled to the bathroom. I turned on the light and looked in the mirror to splash some water on my face. But when I looked up, I swear I didn't recognize myself. The face staring back at me seemed off. The eyes were dull and emotionless. The skin looked waxy and pale like a mannequin. I stood there for a minute, blinking and shaking my head. I thought maybe I was just groggy or seeing things. But the face didn't change. It was definitely not my normal face. I called for my wife. "Hey, can you come here a minute?" She came into the bathroom, took one look at me and freaked out. "What's wrong with your face?" she yelled. I tried to play it cool. "What are you talking about? This is just my face." But she kept shaking her head, insisting that I looked different. Totally different. I washed up and got dressed for work, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror during my commute, and the foreign face stared back each time. At the office, people avoided me. My boss called me into his office and said, "John, are you feeling all right? You look ill." By lunchtime, I was sufficiently freaked out. I pulled out my phone and took a selfie. The face looking back at me was pale and waxy with dull, lifeless eyes. This was not my face. I didn't understand how, but somehow during the night, my normal face had changed. The rest of the workday dragged on in a haze of anxiety. I avoided people and kept my head down, hoping no one else would notice the change. As soon as 5 came, I raced home, hoping to get to the bottom of the situation. My wife opened the door and yelped. "You look even more different than this morning," she exclaimed. She pulled me inside and sat me down, staring and touching my face like she was examining an alien. "What happened to you?" she asked. I just shook my head. We were both stunned and terrified. We racked our brains trying to figure out what could have caused my ordinary face to transform overnight. There were no logical explanations. Exhausted and disturbed, I went to bed that night, praying this was some bizarre, short-lived fluke. But when I woke up the next day and looked in the mirror, my hopes were crushed. Staring back at me was a face I did not recognize. It was still pale and waxy, but the structure seemed to have morphed further. The chin was more pointed, the eyes more deep-set. I looked like a stranger. I called into work sick and made an emergency doctor's appointment. As I sat sweating in the sterile exam room, I hoped against hope there was some medical explanation for my changing face. The doctor was nice, but I could tell he was unnerved and skeptical as he examined me. My vitals were normal, no facial swelling or trauma. In the end, he suggested I see a psychiatrist. He couldn't find anything physically wrong, so it must be mental, he reasoned. I left feeling defeated. This wasn't just fatigue or light playing tricks on my eyes. Something was horribly wrong. Each morning that week, my face continued to morph into someone new. It was difficult to recognize myself. I stopped going out in public. I couldn't bear the stares and whispers when people looked at this imposter's face. My wife was distraught. She cried while caressing my foreign features. We both felt helpless. After a week of isolation and despair, I knew I had to take control. I set up cameras facing my bed to record what happened as I slept. I was anxious to see the footage, bracing for something horrifying. But the next morning I saw myself tossing and turning as usual. No sudden transformations. Yet when I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror, the face staring back remained a stranger's. Who was this creepy doppelganger invading my reflection? The recordings proved that the changes weren't happening in real time. Soon, even familiar reflections became unreliable. I glimpsed the foreign face everywhere. Rearview mirror, store windows, polished tabletops. I stopped trusting my eyes and avoided reflective surfaces altogether. But the bizarre phenomenon persisted. Co-workers continued remarking on my altered appearance. My wife cringed at the sight of me. I was unrecognizable even to myself. My psyche started unraveling. I hardly slept or ate. I felt no connection to the body I inhabited. The person in the mirror was an interloper, an imposter. In my lucid moments, I feared I was going mad. Then one night something snapped. A simmering rage boiled over. This sinister stranger had stolen my identity, my face, my very self. In the bathroom mirror we stood, two opposites locked in a bizarre battle of wills. Something primal took over. I smashed the glass, grasping jagged shards with bare hands. I carved into the imposter's waxy flesh, slicing my own fingers in the process. Blood and skin mingled as my vision blurred. The pale mask scowled back, unmoving. With an animal roar, I hurled my body at the mirror, determined to obliterate the invader. The last thing I recall is my wife's panicked screams as shards rained down. I awoke days later in a hospital bed, face throbbing with pain. My wife sat nearby, eyes red-rimmed from crying. She recounted finding me unconscious on the bathroom floor, face savaged and surrounded by broken glass. As she dabbed my wounds, I noticed genuine relief in her eyes. The doctors repaired my face as best they could. My features were rearranged but recognizable again. The following weeks of recovery were filled with therapy sessions and psychiatric evaluations. The doctors called it a severe dissociative fugue state. My wife clung to logical explanations, desperate for things to make sense again. But a nagging unease remains twisted up inside me. I still catch glimpses of that strange face on reflective surfaces, familiar yet foreign. I worry that one morning I'll wake to find the imposter has returned, invading my mirror unseen once more. And the darkest part of me wonders, what if that waxy-faced stranger was actually me all along?